You're welcome back to the Gavel. Now let's take a look at more interesting matters which came up in the National Assembly during the week.
The House of Representatives has condemned in the strongest terms what it describes as breaches to the Constitution and the laws of statutory transfers by the executive with regard to the 2018 Appropriation Act. In a motion sponsored by Representative Edward Pajok, the House observed that some agencies such as the Independent National Electoral Commission and the Universal Basic Education Commission, who were on first-line charge, have not been fully funded. The lawmakers are urging President Muhammadu Buhari to direct the Ministry of Finance and the Accountant General of the Federation to ensure the 2019 Appropriation Act is fully implemented as regards the statutory transfers for these agencies. The House also resolved to transmit the resolution to the Senate for concurrence.
Further notes that the Constitution was amended by the First Alteration Act 2010 Act No. 1 by altering Section 81, subsection 3, to place INEC, the National Assembly, and the Judiciary on first-line charge by stipulating that the amount standing to the credit of those agencies or arms of government be paid directly to such bodies. Further notes that these bodies are captured in the Annual Appropriation Acts under statutory transfers. Worried that the executive arm of government is currently in breach of the Constitution by refusing or neglecting to implement the mandatory provisions of the Constitution regarding statutory transfers and first-line charge requirements, by not releasing the funds to these bodies in line with the Appropriation Act 2018 and the Constitution. Worried that in spite of a previous resolution of the House passed in 2018 on the above subject and the appearance of the Minister of Finance before the ad hoc committee, the matter has remained unresolved. Disturbed by the implication of the brazen flouting of the Appropriation Act 2018 and the Constitution, which may make the legislature and the judiciary to become subservient to the executive, thereby negating the letters and spirit of the Constitution and the law, with dire consequences on the practice of democracy in Nigeria.
A federal lawmaker, Senator Ben Bruce, is insisting that Nigeria cannot run away from the revolution of electric cars. Now, speaking with journalists at the National Assembly a day after the Senate rejected his bill to phase out fuel-powered cars and introduce electric cars, Senator Bruce says his bill was only to ensure that Nigeria is not left behind in the revolution of electric cars and become a laughingstock in the Committee of Nations.
Yesterday, I presented two historic bills on the floor of the Senate, and both of them were rejected. I knew when I presented the bills, they would be rejected, so I wasn't surprised. I knew because I did not think my colleagues understood the value of what I was presenting. The first one was the phasing out of combustion engine cars, as we know it, the cars we drive today. The reason I presented the bill is very, very simple. In a few years' time, no country in the world will manufacture these cars anymore. None. They will not be manufactured. So even if the president of Nigeria wanted to buy a car, he'd have to buy a second-hand car. That is a fact. For this reason, Nigeria must be prepared and understand that the cars we drive today are dinosaurs. If my colleagues say no, I can't control that. It's simple majority. The executive, under President Muhammadu Buhari, should instruct the Minister of Transport to understand that this is the way Nigeria must go. There is no way out. In other words, whether you like it or not, Nigeria, the rest of the world, will only drive electric cars. That is a fact. Now, the argument is to say, well, we sell petrol. So what? So what if you sell petrol? Nobody's going to buy your petrol. Nobody's going to buy it. They'll have no value. They'll buy gas, but nobody's going to buy petrol.
The Senate has passed through second reading a bill to provide for the documentation and protection of domestic workers in the country. The sponsor of the bill, Senator Magnus Abbey, says the bill seeks to protect domestic workers from all forms of abuse and also protect employers from complicity of crimes committed by domestic workers. The bill stipulates that the biometric data and other background information of domestic workers be registered by the Ministry of Labour nationwide.
I think that the Federal Ministry of Labour and Productivity is a ministry that has the mandate already, to be able to regulate this industry and should be able to develop the capacity to carry out its function as an effective Ministry of Labour. What we propose is a documentation. If you're going to be able to hire helps, you need to be documented with the Federal Ministry of Labour as somebody who is using domestic workers. If you're going to use a domestic worker, you must register that domestic worker with the Federal Ministry of Labour. And whenever you terminate the services of the domestic worker, the ministry should also be informed. If the worker decides to leave, the ministry should also be informed so that they can keep track of these people by their fingerprint and biometrics. And then we should also be able to be guided. The ministry should be able to guide you as to what you can do with your domestic help and what you cannot do. And in a situation where anybody is being used illegally as labor, without pay, without condition, you can go to the ministry and report. And they will come and arrest the person and then prosecute the person, which is what happens all over the world. So that at any given point in time, in dealing with a Nigerian citizen, whether he's rich or poor, people should know that every citizen, no matter their situation, is protected by law and has recourse to statutory protection and all that. Secondly, for the domestic workers themselves, they're also documented, so that if you were a cook in Lagos and your fingerprints are taken, your photographs are taken, if you do something there and run to Abuja and want to come and be a cook to somebody in Abuja without disclosing what happened between you and your former boss in Lagos, once they put your prints in here, it will come out that you have worked here before, and those people can contact those people for references, or at least ask you what happened in the former place you worked and all that, so that there's some protection and tracking on both sides. So there's protection for the domestic workers, and there's also protection for the employers.
The Minister of Agriculture, Mr. Aldu, is still speaking about the dangers of Nigeria's excessive importation of goods. The minister shocked Nigerians during a National Assembly budget defense session by stating that some Nigerians import pizza from London and such practices are weakening the naira. Speaking in an interview with Channels Television, Mr. Ogwe says his statement was intended to shock Nigerians into realizing our excesses.
The point is to shock Nigerians into realizing that we have some fairly rather ridiculous habits, which we ourselves have to check. We're cutting down on imports, and what's the reaction of Nigerians? Anger. When the CBN governor, drew up a list of 42 items not valid for foreign exchange, what was the reaction of Nigerians? Anger. He said to them, we're running out of forex. We don't have enough money to keep paying bills for things that we can avoid. They were angry. They were very angry. I remember writing him a letter, even before I became minister in August 2015, saying I supported him and that this was a step we should have taken 20 years earlier. So we too, as a people, have our challenges. You ask if, as a member of government, I'm drawing attention to these issues. That's precisely what I was doing in the Senate. The Senate is part of government. The senators were asking, why are you importing so much? Why don't you ban this or ban that? Now, banning has another problem. You're a member of the WTO. You understand? The World Trade Organization. And you're not really free to just ban, right? So what do? Impose tariffs. Hey, Donald Trump is doing no less. Americans aren't quarreling with him. But you try it here, the reaction is not always friendly. They think you are doing it because you want to punish people. That's the way Nigerians react. When government says, let's slow down on this, say, what do you mean? It's my money. Yeah, your money is part of the Commonwealth. Because the day you run down your foreign reserve and nobody has confidence in you, you can't open an LC to bring in a fighter jet, right? To buy a ship, to buy aircraft, because you can't carry dollars in cash and go and pay for these things.
Now, this is where we call it a day on this week's edition of The Gavel. If you have any views on any of the issues discussed, please email us on thegavel@channelstv.com. Thank you for staying with us and see you again next week.